Avast ye scurvy dogs, welcome to another Supatease video. And do you want to be a pirate? Or are you one of those weirdos that prefers to be ninjas? Well, if you are of the latter, wanting to be an outlaw rogue here moving into Shadowlands, I'm going to be jumping through a quick review of it as it is now in the beta stage. Moving forward, a little bit more has been solidified in terms of what we should expect, although it is still subject to change, and there is still a couple of holes in the bottom of the boat that it is sailing on. But just to begin things off, if you're new to the channel, I'm reviewing the specializations with the main primary factor being fun. And fun to me is something that challenges me. I'm constantly engaged with it, trying to improve and get better over time. And if that has an infinite ceiling to where I feel like I'm almost never able to play perfectly, then I will enjoy that spec for a longer period of time. And that's sort of my definition of fun. I know a lot of other people's definition of fun is just winning. My argument to that definition of fun is if I put a button in front of you and all you had to do is push the button and it told you that you won, would you have fun playing that game? So to me, it's more important to have fun and engaging specializations than it is to just win. Having said that, it still does matter if you can play to win. Otherwise, you'll never get invited to things, which means you can't play at all. So playing to win is important, but only playing for a win, I think, is a little bit of a hollow reason to be even playing a game in the first place. But regardless, a lot of abilities are going back baseline for the class. So for Rogue, you're seeing evasion return. It does mean that riposte is gone. Supposedly it's coming back as a talent, but it's not listed as a talent currently. So as it stands right now, it's just evasion, but it's still just a personal defensive cooldown against physical attacks. It's very similar to what riposte was anyways. Kidney shot is back. This doesn't mean you get 2 stuns. Between the Eyes is now going back to being it's becoming a damage modifier. And Kidney Shot is going to be your stun. So you've got more combo points to manage than you did previously. So if you liked trying to figure out what was the best spender at any given moment, Outlaw is really going to challenge you in that regard for Shadowlands, because you have so many different finisher options and they all now interact with Roll the Bones, but we'll get back to that Roll the Bones a little bit later on when we actually get to it. Poisons are baseline to all rogue specs, and wound poison I would imagine is going to be trainable at some point. Mind numbing you learn as you level up, so you have access to the entire kit of poisons. They're not just honor talents, they're not just available to assassination. What does that mean for you in PvE? You put this on, it does damage. Like you don't really care too much in PvE. In PvP, it's going to increase your viability by being able to bring in mortal wounds effects, although only listed currently at 5%, stacks up to 15, or potentially mind numbing to reduce both casting speeds and attack speeds of their targets. I do suppose in PvE, if you really wanted to try and make it work, or if Blizzard tuned the trash monsters to be this interactive, you would utilize a new baseline ability called Shiv, which basically amplifies the secondary poison. So if there's a monster with a fixate mechanic, so I'm thinking about like the little weird spider blob, vampire bat blob things in Underrot that will fixate on somebody and chase them, and they don't care about taunt, they don't care about aggro, you could Shiv that monster and it would be slowed heavily by 70%, and you could help your group out. But I mean, in PvE, you just want to be #1 damage, so maybe it ends up being useful in terms of that for utility, but you do trade off 20 energy. It does generate a combo point at least, so it will interact with your build. But aside from trying to utilize it for utility, I don't think it will fit into the rotation. There's so many other things that you're managing that this is strictly utility. In PvP, it's great. You can maintain a very powerful slow. Slice and Dice is now baseline to all rogue specs. It's not a talent. It's going back to the way that it was. And this is, again, what I was talking about. You've got way more finishers to manage. So keeping Slice and Dice up, keeping Between the Eyes debuff up on the targets. You've got a lot more to manage. It's going to be a very taxing spec in my mind, the way that it's looking so far. So if you want something that you're just like, okay, what's the next finisher I need to spend? Did I get this buff on my roll of bones? Do I have adrenaline rush rolling? Is my between the eyes already up? Did I get a pistol shot proc? You're always going to be just glued to your screen, basically, waiting for things to light up, and trying to make sure that you're matching with what lights. It's like Guitar Hero on super hard mode. You just got like roll the bones buffs coming down. And you're like, I hit that one, hit that one, hit that one, hit that one. Hyperspeed whack-a-mole. It's going to be really engaging. In PvP, it might end up being cumbersome because let's say you've just got a specific buff roll, but then your crowd control, you didn't get to benefit from it. Outlaw's main difficulty in PvP has been a lack of consistent damage, mostly on single target, and a lack of Immortal Wounds effect. So it is getting Immortal Wounds effects returned to it. Potentially its single target damage will be more adequate in a PvP scenario because they're bringing down AoE on all classes. Outlaw Rogue is getting hit pretty hard in that regard, but it's, I think, important to note that all the specs are pretty much getting hit hard. So it will still likely be a top dog when it comes to AoE. It's just instead of hitting 10 billion things, it's 5 things, but you'll still excel at hitting the 5 things. There were some nerfs, I believe, in reductions to the healing outputs of things like Crimson Vial, if you just want to note that. I think it used to be 30% of your healing. So there's some defensive reductions. As to whether or not this is aimed at PvE or PvP, I'm a little bit uncertain. I feel like this is more so a PvP reduction, maybe something for Torghast. They don't want rogues to be able to sustain infinitely. But when we get to the Conduits, I think that might not actually be the case. Oh my god, one of the Conduits that's coming in for well, Rogue in general, actually, but it's so nuts. Anyways, moving down here, these are specific to Outlaw, not just any rogue specialization. And this is the buff that everyone either loves or hates depending on their luck. I mean, you could just play better. Why don't you just roll 6 buffs? I mean, come on. It's a cooldown, so it doesn't interact with your combo point generators and your finishers. Instead, it sort of dictates which one of them you want to prioritize. You can still roll 6 buffs. I rolled a 6 buff, and then you just go spam happy, but you're more likely not going to be rolling towards that 6 buff range, and you're just dictating your finishing moves depending on what you're getting, if it's crit modifiers, or the new buff, which I'm kind of forgetting the name of. Basically, every combo point you spend, it will also apply Slice and Dice. So if you get that buff, then you don't have to spend anything on Slice and Dice. You get free Slice and Dices during that buff time. So it changes the way from your default version of casting the spec to now it's an alteration. Now I no longer have to press this. Now I should prioritize this finisher. So it's going to always be changing your rotation. You'll never have the same fight twice, basically. If that's something that interests you, it's a little bit more improvised and a lot less predictable, then that'll be a good pick for you. But at the same time, it still does have the downfall of it being random, so you may not feel like it's in your control. It does seem like they want the buffs to be more evenly matched, so that it's not the end of the world if you don't get it specifically. And Roll the Bones works with your Restless Blade, so as you spend finishing moves, it works with your True Bearing. It's buffs to True Bearing as a buff, so you're not just only prioritizing Ruthful Precision. You'll be able to reduce Roll the Bones and then keep fishing for better buffs in general. You still are fishing for it, it's just not in your rotation. You get to do your rotation, and then Roll the Bones alters your rotation rather than I'm rolling the bones to try and get lucky and that's all I'm pressing the whole fight. So I think it's pretty fun there. Grappling Hook, just baseline with just talents to improve it. I love Grappling Hook. I think this might be my favorite movement spell, just getting to jump around. That alone actually makes me want to play it. Reminds me of Legend of Zelda. I guess we kind of skipped over Between the Eyes. So Between the Eyes, no longer range stun. That's a pretty big loss of power when it comes to PvP specifically, although who plays Outlaw Rogue and BFA? I feel like it's tragic. Outlaw Rogue is tragic. I mean, it's trying to be this hip pirate spec and nobody acknowledges it. No one's playing it really, and when they do, they just fail miserably. I would really like to see Outlaw given a second chance and come back when it comes to PvP and PvE. You're probably thinking I sound crazy right now with Blade Flurry, which we'll get to. In PvE, it was pretty straightforward. Blade Flurry popped. All right, everything's dead. I'm top of the meter. This is great. But Between the Eyes is now just another modifier to your damage. Gives you critical strike, kind of like Recklessness used to do. and it does more damage when it crits itself. So if you get the shark buffs, you can be going for some really big crits on between the eyes, reduces its cooldown with Restless Blades. So it's still there as like your big hitter, like your blunderbuss big hitter, but it's not stunning the target. The advantage is that you're not putting the target on stun DR as well in PvE, just to get extra damage out from your abilities. You'll be more able to dictate when you want to stun with Kidney Shot. But in PvP, you'll have to decide, do I use my combo points here for a stun, or should I use my combo points to build up more damage or maintain my slice and dice? There's a lot more of that old school rogue monitoring that I love. Blade Flurry is now not 2 charges, it's capped at 1, but likely they've balanced it so that it's still strong at hitting the amount of targets that it's allowed to. It's 4, but as you rank up, it'll be 5. So when you're at max level in Shadowlands, it'll be up to 5. So it's still just the same kind of thing. You activate Blade Flurry, you start AoEing everything, you start going ham, you're top of the meter. Big boom, right? Usually the specs that are performing the best in Mythic Plus are, at least through Battle for Azeroth, are the specs that can immediately ramp to hitting as many targets as possible. Blade Flurry enabled Outlaw Rogue to do that a couple steps faster than a lot of other specs, which made it top dog for most of Battle for Azeroth. There was only really like Unholy DK and maybe Havoc, Demon Hunter, or a Windwalker potentially competing with it. So I'm curious to see what happens with them capping AoE, and depending on how they tune dungeons, as to whether or not this specifically will determine whether or not a spec ends up being strong, or if it'll come down to utility. Utility things could be like a mind-numbing poison, reducing casting speed. Let's say they put a lot of monsters that cast really fast, and you want to bring a mind-numbing poison to reduce those casts so it's more manageable. They might focus more on utility, and Outlaw Rogue does bring a lot with Gouge as a disorient, Kidney Shot still for a stun, so it has the potential to still succeed, even if AoE damage doesn't end up reigning supreme, which it still does have. It's not like it's completely gone away. It's just nerfed from its current state, much like all of the other AoE is. And that's pretty much it for looking at just the baseline spells. We've still got a lot to go through, though, with Conduits, with legendaries in this video. So thank you for sticking this far through. If you're enjoying the content, please subscribe. Leave a comment below as well. But moving into the talents, there's been some weird oddness going on with acrobatic strikes, which I think a lot of people consider to be maybe too strong. It's very similar to the feral affinity, or I should say the balance affinity for feral druids, where they get extra range, they can avoid mechanics, and this benefited your Blade Flurry damage a lot. It got removed, but now it's back. I thought that it was maybe getting replaced with Riposte, because that's what I was also reading, that Riposte is going to come back as a talent for an improved evasion, but it's here again. And the only talent that's coming soon is the former Slice and Dice. So I really doubt they put Riposte here, because Alacrity would just be you take it every time. Like, you still get evasion, big deal. You don't get Riposte, but you get Alacrity is insane for Outlaw in terms of its generation and resource management. There's no way that you're in PvE and likely PvP as well. There's no way that you're not going to want to get this. So this talent needs to be insane. Maybe that's potential for something really cool and insane to come out here for Outlaw moving into Shadowlands. Some of the things that I miss from the old former combat versions of the spec are things like Killing Spree. You know, you pressed Killing Spree, took your hands off the keyboard, you had a good time. It's just been a talent that you don't take ever. In PvE, it's almost always Dancing Steel because of the strength of Blade Flurry. If you're ever forced in a situation where it's only single target, then you were just always taking Blade Rush. And Killing Spree just kind of was like, meh. You can't interact with all of their combo point generators and finishers when you're just blinking around the map. So I don't know if they should bring back the Killing Spree as the former one where you're like immune to crowd control, or a red buff Killing Spree, but I feel like Killing Spree was like a main identity part of combat back then and Outlaw Rogue now, and you just never get to see it because these two options are so much more superior and interact with the spec better. So, but Killing Spree is still just probably not going to be something that you take. It still brings strengths like Cheat Death to avoid mechanics or to soak something for your team that would otherwise kill them, so it's great in PvE. Outlaw Rogue will always, Rogue in general with Cheat Death will always remain strong because of this, benefiting to extra damage on your kidney shots, joined with your utility. In PvP still, Blinding Powder reducing the cooldown of blind so that healers' trinkets don't line up with it was one reason that Outlaw Rogue was maintaining some level of competitiveness in PvP, but it couldn't contend with Assassination's constant damage and mortal wounds effect. The burst damage was on a much shorter cooldown and more reliable with Shadow Dance on Sub Rogue in PvP. Even though Sub Rogue wasn't necessarily one of the best specs either, it still just couldn't. It was competing in the same territory in PvP with Subtlety, but it wasn't as reliable and it wasn't as frequent. So potentially it is though now, as with all the stuff we've gone over. There's not any new honor talents, any new and exciting honor talents, so it's a little bit unfortunate in that regard. But that's it for what's in the base game. Now, when we look at the Covenant abilities, this is going to be your biggest choice for Shadowlands. Which Covenant do you want to go for? It's going to be a really big pain in the butt to go back and forth between them. So I would recommend that you make sure you pick the one that you really want. You should likely consider which point of content do you competitively play, if you play competitively. So you want to be at the peak of that area, whether it's dungeons, raids, battlegrounds, arenas, whatever it is. You should probably, if you're a competitive player, take that into consideration first. If that isn't a big issue to you, you're not getting the absolute min-max, you're not trying to get to the rank 1 ladder or the highest rated.io score, you just fool around with your friends for fun, then you can be a little bit more lenient in terms of your selection. I'm hoping that by the time all these Covenant abilities come out, that there's no meme one where if you picked it because you liked the appearance of Necrolord, but the spell is actually a meme, and people will be like, you picked Necrolord? I'm not even inviting you. You want to be on my friends list? Like, I'm really hoping it doesn't get to that. So hopefully they'll keep their eyes on that if they want to keep it like this, where it's such a big choice in the expansion. But regardless, the Kyrian one for rogues and the way that it interacts with Outlaw, it deals 60% of your attack power's arcane damage to an enemy, extracting their anima to anima charge a combo point. Basically, you press this, it's going to randomly tell you, all right, if your next finisher, let's say you press the spell, anima charges you at 3 combo points. Now, if you spend exactly 3 combo points, you will get a 7 combo point effect. So it increases your efficiency by a lot because you only have to spend 3 to get a 7 benefit. You get to exceed the cap of the combo points available to the rogue for a massive benefit. The downside of Outlaw is that there's a lot of just RNG combo point generation. So you, in a world where you're really unlucky, I think it's probably impossible to never get it. So if you had a 3-point anima charge and you just kept getting lucky and rolling 2-2 to 4 over and over and over and never got to spend it on 3, it would be really unfortunate. The main advantage is that it does do a lot of damage up front if that situation ever happened. But there's already so much going on with building combo points and then which finisher you use and then trying to get your brain staring at your combo point area to be like, did it go past 3? Yeah, I need to play normally. Did it go to 3? I can play altered now. Which buff did I get? Can I play altered with that buff? I'm somebody who likes that, like that high ceiling, right? And this is already just like becoming a little bit too 5-head for me. But it's a solid damage output Covenant spell. You still get the vials, which hopefully are changed to be usable in ranked PvP combat. Otherwise, it would be the only signature ability not usable in ranked PvP combat. So I'm wondering what they're going to do with that. You still get the stun reduction benefits, the polymorph reduction benefits of Mechanicos as well. So Kyrian is overall for PvP solid, and in PvE it's still going to be a really good output. I'm just worried that it's like it might be too much, at least for my brain, to juggle. Venthyr are going to be getting slaughter, and you slaughter the target for a lot of damage. The target's anima mixes with your lethal poison, coating your weapons for the next 5 minutes. Slaughter poison deals shadow damage for 12 seconds and steals 15% of healing done to the target. So when we get to the conduits that are absolutely insane for PvP, they're bringing back one of the best, and when I say best, most broken mechanics Rogue has really ever had in PvP. PvE, you don't care. PvP, it was the most broken. This would have insane synergy with it. I could see specs of Rogue, whether it's Outlaw, Assassin, or Sub, where you are just immortal. I mean, it fits with the vampire theme, right? You like suck the healing from your opponent. You don't care about the healing in PvE, likely. So it really just depends on how much damage does this do. And that we're still not far enough into the tuning to decide that. But if that's intriguing you as a PvP player to never take damage and heal yourself to full all the time, yeah, it's got big benefits. You get Door of Shadows. Think of it as like a second Shadow Step. Really good. And it's interruptible, which you might think is a downside in PvP, but because you're a physical damage dealer, when you're interrupted, you still can do all of your other stuff you need to do. You don't care. And then your healer's like, thank you. I don't have to deal with being interrupted. So it's actually a big benefit that it is interruptible for the specs that don't care if they get interrupted. So Venthyr seems good overall. It's got strong crit modifiers as well built into its Soulbind. So for PvE, it could end up being really strong just because of that. Necrolord Covenant ability is the Serrated Bone Spike. I don't think it even says it there. Basically, at the moment, the way that it's tuned is it does insane damage. It's a permanent dot, and it's ranged. I mean, everything that I just said there should just make your jaw drop. At the moment, depending on how they tune it, I feel like there's no way that they can't tune it. They're not going to tune it to not be as good as it is, because it's insane that it's a permanent dot. And it costs basically nothing. You just throw it onto anybody you want. It would make Outlaw get a lot of consistent pressure, possibly open up options like Rogue Warlock, but I feel like Assassination will always be synergizing better with damage over time effects in PvP than Outlaw. And it's not really super bursty or punchy. It's much more sustained based. So in PvP, it might fall off depending on how they decide to go about it, if they're going to nerf it or not. Fleshcraft's crowd control immunity, I've spoken about it in the previous guides, has been nerfed. It's not permanent immunity to crowd control while the shield is up. It's only while you're channeling it, and only you get 4 seconds if you finish the channel. So the channel obviously can be stopped. In PvP, it's going to be important to stop it. But you could maybe immune yourself to some crowd control during a burst window if you saw that in the future, right before you were going to do a setup or something, as rogues are known for setup in PvP. But in PvE, these all so far are just, this does damage, burst damage, this does dot, this does dot. It's just going to be what does the most damage, and that's going to be what you pick. Currently, it seems like they're on the table with what they want to do with Sepsis. It's not in the game, but there's tooltips for it. It seemed the most ridiculous for Subtlety or Assassination, that have more interactions with Stealth than Outlaw does. Outlaw doesn't care too much. Maybe that's why they're waiting, because Outlaw doesn't interact too much with Stealth, and it needs to be a Covenant ability that fits for all of the specs. Otherwise, this would be a meme pick for Outlaw, other than the other passives in the Soulbinds. But you already have Cheat Death as well, and you already have Slows, which would be the other benefits of going Night Fae. So it needs to be something that works with Outlaw. Otherwise, I do think Night Fae could be a meme, depending on if they decide to go with Sepsis being this kind of vanish cooldown reduction dot or not. You still get Soul Shape for extra movement and blinking around, but to me, as an Outlaw rogue, you really want to be getting damage out of this. So I've got my eyes peeled to see what they're going to do with the Night Fae, because if it doesn't do damage, I mean, Serrated Bone Spike is easily the best at the moment. Slaughter could be really strong for just never dying. And then this Kyrian one could end up being the highest performer because it's so difficult to use. But then if you get unlucky with the combo point generation, what if it ends up just being bad? And it seems really hard to use in comparison to these other things. Like these other things, just you press it, it's a dot. You press it, it's a dot. This is like, you got to pay hyper attention to everything going on all the time, and then do you really get a benefit at the end of the day? Like, it's so hard and complicated. I don't even know if you'll end up getting that much of a benefit at the end of the day. So that's kind of my initial review of the Covenant abilities. We've got legendaries. So for just the baseline rogues, this is if you want to switch between rogue specs, these will work better for you if you're a multi-specker. Essence of Bloodfang, your combo point generators have a chance to infect the target with Bloodfang, causing bleed damage over 6 seconds and healing the rogue. Again, maybe synergizing for an immortality rogue build, like a vampire. So if you're going to go Venthyr, you could get insane damage there. Potentially synergies more so with Assassination, though, than Outlaw. Mark of the Assassin, while stealth is active for the next 5 seconds after breaking stealth, your critical strike chances increase by 100%. Really good for Between the Eyes, as its crit damage is ×4. This could be really cheesy. It's strong for Subtlety because you get access to stealth so much more frequently than the other specs, whereas Outlaw benefits probably the least from stealth. But this 100% crit modifier on Between the Eyes might be absolutely insane. That's something to keep an eye on. Tiny Toxic Blades. Shiv causes your poisons and bleeds in the target to spread to a nearby enemy. You could slow 2 targets. This seems like this is going to be the PvP legendary or something, but it's just kind of... I don't really... As Outlaw, you don't have bleeds. I mean, serrated blade you can spam. I guess maybe you could move Slaughter over to a second target. I'm not immediately like juiced up to see it. Invigorating Shadow Dust. Vanish reduces the remaining cooldown of your other abilities. Would be nice to know specifically what abilities. I mean, reducing the cooldown of Roll the Bones would be nice. Reducing the cooldown between the eyes. Adrenaline Rush. So nice cooldown reduction there. Again, it's not immediately standing out to me like this is going to be insane. So maybe not one that I'm going to go for initially right off the bat. These are specific to Outlaw Rogue. They likely perform better than the general Rogue legendaries. And if you're someone who likes to parse high, push Mythic Keystones really high, and you're not looking for any specific PvP cheese or utility, these will probably be more so the ones that you go for. Celerity, you have a chance while Slice and Dice is active to gain Adrenaline Rush. Really good for just total resource management. Concealed Blunderbuss. When Sinister strikes an additional time, there's a 33% chance that your next pistol shot will strike 3 additional times. All right, let's put more more RNG. If you put enough RNG into it, you'll just get lucky all the time, right? I mean, this one seems kind of fun and cheeky, but I'm curious to see how it ends up working. Guile Charm, take advantage of the natural ebb and flow of combat. It's an interesting way to start a sentence. For an Outlaw Rogue, like, are pirates all about ebb and flow? I feel they're more just like... I feel like they're the least ebb and flow of any fighter or whatever. Causing your Sinister Strike to gradually increase your damage dealt by up to 30%. This maximum effect will last for until canceled before fading and beginning a cycle anew. That would be great for consistent damage. Sinister Strike to gradually increase your damage overall. This could make Outlaw Rogue better in PvP where it lacks that consistent damage. You could hit this big ramp point where you ramp this up to 30%, then go for a Blade Flurry. This has potential. Maybe it even has synergies to get Killing Spree back on the table. I kind of doubt it. Greenskin's Wickers. Between the eyes has a 20% chance for a combo point to increase the damage of your next pistol shot by 200%. If you got pistol shot proc, on top of that, it would be insane. If it ever gets to a point where you can wear 2 legendaries, combo that with Concealed Blunderbuss, you fire buff pistol shot 3 times, boom, headshot. That would be kind of nice. Again, this is kind of fun. This is hard. These legendaries, they almost all just seem kind of fun. I feel like the Adrenaline Rush is, again, they're all chances, a chance. This is the most consistent, like Guile Charm. To me, that stands out the most because to me, Outlaw Rogues in PvP, where I predominantly play, you want more consistent damage. And then in PvE, it still benefits you. You can still max out at a big 30%. What if you roll 6 buffs, right, when you get this at 30%? Oh my god. Think about the potential. Guile Charm is standing out to me at the moment. And then if I wanted to be an Immortal Rogue, as the build I'm suggesting when we look at the Conduits as well, and be Venthyr, then this Essence of Bloodfang seems really good. And then this one, which will probably get nerfed because they don't like it when people die too fast. If you got a huge Between the Eyes crit, you might kill people in PvP really fast. But I feel like when that kind of stuff exists, they nerf it really quickly. More likely that they won't nerf you if you're immortal than if you one-shot people. Here we go for Conduits. So they're broken down into potency, endurance, and finesse. That's damage, defense, and utility. I should have said we don't care if you're a PvEer, but in PvP you will care. Outlaw Rogue. So for potency, your main gouge, so chance to hit with your offhand, has an additional 10% chance with Blade Flurry. Remember, you're only going to be able to have 1 of each of these, and they rank up, so it's a bigger and bigger chance to get this to proc during Blade Flurry. Would be solid for AoE. I have to wait and see if any of these, again, in PvE, these are probably just whichever one parses the highest you're going to take. I'm trying to see if there's anything that would stand out uniquely to them, but to me, these are all just throughput. Count the odds. Ambush, Slaughter, and Dispatch have a 7% chance to grant you Roll the Bones combat enhancement buff you do not have. So if you wanted to combat negative RNG, you would be able to use Dispatch as just Eviscerate and apply a buff that you don't have. That's nice for alleviating some of the RNG. I feel like you'd want to have at least one of those, no matter what you're doing. Sleight of Hand, Roll the Bones has a 7% chance of instantly resetting its cooldown. So if you wanted the degenerate RNG 6 buff gameplay, you can get it back on this Conduit. Because this would rank up, right? So it'd be 7% with a higher chance every time, and you could just keep rolling the bones. So I saw a bunch of other content creators saying that they think this removes that gameplay, but I think it's still there. It's just that it's not part of your rotation. You still are just rolling the slot machine over and over, but it's not affecting your main rotation anymore. Triple threat. Sinister Strike has a 20% chance to strike with both weapons after it strikes an additional time. Nice for some single target consistent damage. So we've got this main gouge thing. This seems like AoE. This seems like a combat to RNG. This seems like you're going all in on RNG. And then this one is more consistent single target. So you could mix yourself to be somewhat decent at AoE with this, somewhat decent at single target with this. And then if it was 3 potency conduits on your soulbind, which I'm not even sure exists, you could decide which element of RNG. Would you rather combat the RNG or embrace the RNG? And that's going to be kind of your main choices. Covenant, soulbind, conduits for potency. So these affect the main ability. Your Echoing Reprimand's damage is just increased by 50%. Does that mean the combo point spender, when you get an enema charge, combo point spender also does 50% more? Probably not. So it's just the baseline of the spell. Flat out more damage. Slaughter's damage and critical strike chance increases by 12%. Bonus is increased by 100% if Slaughter Poison is active. Interesting. So again, I've got my eyes on this Vampire Rogue. I might try it out. I'll level up as Venthyr and try this Vampire Rogue build that I want to see if I'm immortal. Because when we get to the Endurance Conduits, which if you're peeking, I'm going to get very mad at you. But this Venthyr Vampire Rogue is actually really standing out to me for PvP. PvE, you don't probably care. Sudden Fractures, Serrated Bone Spikes, bleed has a 3% chance to deal its damage a second time. If it wasn't crazy to have a very low cost ranged permanent lasting bleed, it can have a chance to hit a second time. This thing is going to be nuts overall. The Vampire build might just fall off depending on if they don't tune Serrated the Bone Spike at all. Just being able to have a permanent bleed, just one-time application, and it's doing the most damage at the moment. Oh man, I just don't know. It's standing out as kind of like the king at the moment. Sepsis is still yet to be seen as to whether or not it will actually come to fruition. So it's probably not worth reading, but periodic damage is increased, so the dot's better. It reduces the cooldown each time. It reduces each time it does damage. So it's only initially, which increases the burst damage of Sepsis. I'm still waiting for when they lock in the Night Fake Covenant ability. This is where we get to it. I saved the best for last, and I kind of want to just skip to it, but it's down here. Cloaked in Shadows, Endurance Conduit. Entering Stealth cloaks you in shadows, gives you a little bit of a shield. We don't care. Nimble Fingers, energy cost of Faint and Crimson Vial reduced by 5. We don't care. Again, you're probably only going to be going for builds where you get 1 Endurance Soulbind anyway. So this one, Recuperator. Do you remember Recuperate? You probably don't unless you're an old man like me. But Cataclysm. Yeah. You remember Rogues never died? Do you remember that? It was Recuperate that made them never die. And they're bringing Recuperate back and mixing it in with Slice and Dice. So you don't even have to think about spending more combo points on the heal. You get the heal in your Slice and Dice. And it's based on your maximum health, which almost always ends up being crazy. And I could imagine that this would synergize with your Rolled Bones buff, where your combo point spenders provide Slice and Dice. So you don't even have to press Slice and Dice, which then wouldn't even have to press Recuperator. I mean, Rogue, this is what made Rogue ridiculous in Cataclysm. Like the best melee period in Cataclysm was Recuperate. And it's back here on a Conduit. So any Rogue spec, even Outlaw, might be made viable in PvP due to this Conduit coming back. Really ridiculous to see it. I thought that they weren't going to be bringing it back. I'm wondering if they're going to bring back the old school Second Wind where warriors couldn't die when they're below, I think it was like 20%. Not sure, but that could save Outlaw Rogue. Definitely makes Subtlety and Assassination crazy. But Outlaw Rogue, it looks like a lot of fun. It seems very complicated at the moment. As somebody who doesn't have very much experience playing it, maybe I sound like I'm just a simpleton to all of you knowledgeable pirates out there, but juggling all the different combo points, and then depending on which buff you get with your rolled opponents will determine which combo point finisher you should be utilizing more often than others. Trying to hit your timings for your rolled opponent crit buff with your Blade Fury synced up together to get maximum cleave. It seems like in PvE it's really awesome. Like you're always going to be able to try and min-max yourself through it. In PvP, you're probably going to have a solid shot at being really competitive now that your poisons are back. For mortal wounds effects, there's some legendaries that could help out your overall single target consistent pressure, and perhaps we see the return of Outlaw Rogue. It's a spec that I really do want to play, but I'm afraid. So like, I remember at the start of the video I said play for fun, not to win. Outlaw Rogue in PvP was one of those specs where you just never got a group, almost ever, unless you like were basically someone was just sympathizing with you. And because I PvP more than PvE, in Mythic Plus you're always getting invited. You didn't care. Probably still going to be the case for Mythic Plusers, but in PvP it was not good enough to ever really get an invite, so I couldn't justify investing so much time to get gear and learn how to play to do it, even though it does seem like fun. So that is still a major concern for me. I'm going to keep my eyes on it and sort of field out whether or not I'll end up playing it. But if you're somebody who likes PvE, there's no doubt in my mind that it will still remain competitive, and it still has the same engaging factors as it did for Battle for Azeroth, with some of the old flavors of old school Rogue coming back to it. So I hope you enjoyed the review here for the Outlaw Rogues. We can set sail and see you in Shadowlands pretty much here. We're getting close to the tier list. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, leave a comment down below, and a like if you liked the video. I greatly appreciate it, and we will see you in the next one.